Good morning, everybody out there. Thank you so much for joining. This is Leslie Wyatt. I'm Director of Regulatory Compliance at SoftPro. Welcome to Saved You a Seat. We are on episode 9. Today, we are going to focus and talk about data security and wire fraud. And we are extremely lucky to have two, what I would consider experts on this. We have Craig Haskins, who is the COO of Nightberry Title, and we have Jay Roberts, who is the CTO of Premier Data Services. So welcome both Craig and Jay.
Hey, hey.
Okay.
Hey,
Also,
thanks.
just a heads up, I am not on webcam, so if you're looking for my lovely face, you are not going to see it. I am actually on vacation and I don't have the best Wi-Fi, but both Craig and Jay decided that they would be nice and go on webcam for this. So you're going to hear me talking, but you're going to see their faces. So as usual, if anyone has any questions, if you could go ahead and type them out in the questions box, we'll try and get to as many as we can throughout the broadcast. If we don't get to your question, again, per usual, we will absolutely go ahead and we will send out a recap. We will send out links to the actual presentation, and we will send out the Q&A so that you can see all the questions that were asked and all the answers as well. So any questions, or if you need to chat for whatever reason, both myself and Ellen Crema with SoftPro will be monitoring that throughout. And again, if we don't get to it, please just remember we always send a recap, and we will also touch on the Q&A and send a separate Q&A doc from there as well. So with that, I think we will go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're going to talk about is really the million-dollar question right now, right? Everybody wants to know, how are we going to reopen under COVID? What's going to happen with the different states as things are reopening? And it's kind of interesting from my take, and I'm going to throw it to Craig and Jay here in a second, but having talked to so many customers and people, it's very interesting because some states really never, closed down, if you will. Other states were on super heightened restrictions. So everyone's going to have a different experience. Everyone's going to have a different take. So it's just really important to understand, like, you can take what we're talking about and kind of apply it to you, but every state and municipalities are going to have different restrictions. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe I'll start with Craig here and just, the first question, which, did you even have to close down your operations during COVID? And even if you didn't close them down 100%, like, how did you handle COVID and maintaining your business?
Yeah, thanks. No, so our company, Nightberry Title, we did not close. We were essential in all of our states, as I believe most of the country was. Title folks were essential. So no, we did not close down, but we made it super flexible for our staff. Our main goal was, as long as we can keep producing the work and maintaining the customer standards for what they needed, that we could do it in many different ways. We probably had about 200 of our staff work from home exclusively for quite a while. Those are the staff members that could do their work from home. They didn't necessarily need to be in the office. And then the other 200 probably worked some type of a hybrid where they were kind of mission critical folks like closers. And we can talk for hours on RON, remote notaries and in the different states and how that worked. But for some of the folks, like some of the lending community who weren't ready for RON, and we were a little disappointed that we couldn't have our closers, hang out in their PJs at home handling closing. So those folks had to come in. But a lot of our closers did a hybrid. They worked part of the day prepping files and prepping packages at home, and then they would come in and do the physical closings. Or, if a staff member needed a big print job, one of the IT headaches that we experienced through COVID was not necessarily getting people on, I know we'll talk about that later, but on securely to our networks, but more, how do I use my, $80 printer I bought at Best Buy for Christmas to print a loan package? And that was somewhat of a disaster. So those folks that needed to print but still wanted to work from home would come into the office, after hours, we're in shifts to print packages. So we had a hybrid, and it worked out really well, surprisingly. I think title people are pretty resourceful, and they figured out a way to get things done. And I want to say there were just a few hiccups, but nothing major. What about you, Jay?
Well, so we a little background is, I work with Premier Data Services, a full service IT company, but I've also worked closely with some of our clients. And, so some of my responses may be from the title side, just so anybody on the call kind of understands that. But so we've dealt with some similar issues, Craig. Getting people, more people remote than we originally had. That was done. We got several laptops pushed out to the field, and people are some of the print issues. Yeah, they were printing to the offices in that case. I mean, not necessarily maybe printing from their home device, but really getting the VPNs, and we've really tried to minimize people connecting from personal devices and really just strictly on company issued laptops. And so I think people have actually enjoyed that part of it. We've got some offices that are larger and some are smaller, and they do require different things. A couple examples are, people who've had close working conditions in the office. We've had to move some of the cubicles and move some of the desks around so they're not like sitting face to face. And then also, staggering the shifts, doing some by appointment only. Really whatever the customer need kind of dictates. Ron is another thing, kind of increased our usage of that, that being allowed down here in Florida recently. So we, we're doing whatever we can through there, and mobile notaries, and then also the in-office drive-through closings or something that have been done too. And I don't know when we'll talk to this. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about about how to manage that. But really, Florida specifically is in a situation where we're kind of contracting now, where we're pretty strict for a little while, and then it started to open it up again, and then now it's kind of getting strict again in terms of requirements. So I think everybody's going to deal with some version of that as you see overall numbers kind of increasing in terms of COVID related issues.
Yeah, the laptop thing was interesting that you mentioned just a minute ago. Our IT guys made a pretty brilliant decision several years ago just to save the space on the desk and offer flexibility. We moved to laptops a few years ago. So when COVID hit, it was great. Ordering new laptops has been, for about 6 weeks there was a little difficult to get that inventory. But the folks that had them, it was real helpful for them to just pick up and go home with them. So that worked out really well. But yeah, good call. Hey, wait, you got to go back to the other slide. I think we had some other things on there I wanted to yap about, if you can.
We are. I don't know what happened there. We're going to talk about a lot more of that. Actually, I wanted to kind of interject real quick. And Jay, you mentioned you're down in Florida, and you guys both mentioned Ron, and we've had several actual webinars on them because it's such a hot topic, and with all the temporary orders and even states making them permanent. But Jay, I was wondering if you could maybe go into a little bit more detail, and then Craig, you as well, because not everyone on here knows Craig's company is in multiple states, and I'll let him talk about it. So maybe you could talk about, I have state guidelines on here, but earlier, Jay, we were talking and you said, it's even down to the city where we are. So what kind of approach have you guys taken as far as how to safely get people back in? And we've talked about some people being comfortable, not being comfortable, and how you're going to, play that out, but also taking into an account the actual different requirements and guidelines. So if you guys, maybe Jay, you could start, since I know you're kind of a city by city, and then Craig, if you want to kind of chime in, especially with the various states, how you guys are doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So one of the things is, filtering your information, right? We're all having to read a lot of articles and releases and information about the jurisdictions that we operate in. And Craig's case, multiple states. He may have more, but really understanding kind of what those requirements are and making sure our people are protected. Back when we had those. You had to carry a letter. We even got letters for people. So they were like, I'm an essential employee if they got pulled over, some things of that nature. But really, as an example, this past Friday afternoon at 5 p.m., the cities of Tampa and the city of St. Petersburg issued new mandates, but they were different from each other, right? And so where the city of Tampa required that people wear masks in all public places, whether you're, in a place for consumers or for the public or sitting behind your desk. Whereas the city of St. Pete issued a requirement that said, you only have to wear it if you're in public spaces where, the public can interact. So that'd be our closing rooms, our reception desks and things of that nature. So really managing those different requirements, across the organizations in your territories. It does require a lot of, information filtering and your sources, leverage the relationships that you have, I guess would be kind of some advice on that, whether that be your underwriter relationships, your local, your local market relationships, and try to, make sure that's communicated out to your organizations. So that's kind of been, what we're dealing with most recently is this re-expansion of, a tighter lockdown where we had in Florida, we had already kind of started to open it up. I mean, you should see the resorts on the beaches that Leslie's at, for example, probably packed with people, swimming in the pools and things of that nature. So it's very different, as you kind of go around the countries, and everybody's feeling it a little bit differently.
Yeah, as far as preparing to open the office back, we made a presentation, a Zoom meeting to our entire company with what our plans were, and this was back about May 18th when Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan and Florida started to open back up. And the number one email we were getting was, do I have to come back to the office, or when do I have to come back to the office? So we tried to make sure everyone was comfortable. We weren't rushing everyone back. We made some changes on obviously allowing the continued remote work. We maintained cleaning, disinfecting protocols, all of that sort of stuff to keep the offices clean and sanitary. We tried to work out some reconfiguration of some workspaces to allow a 6-foot buffer to kind of abide by the rules in the CDC. We allowed for staggered shifts. So, if you're sitting within in a cube area or somewhere, and your desk is next to someone pretty with close proximity, maybe you work Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the office this week, and he or she works Tuesday, Thursday, and then you flip flop. Or so we've left it up to everyone to work with their local managers on making it work so that our staff is comfortable and that the work is going out. And that it's safe. We obviously spent a ton of money on Zoom and things like GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar, things like this, which we encourage our staff to use. We limited in-person interactions and sales calls and taking customers places, or having a lunch, or sales calls to a lawyer or realtor or banker's office. So we try to limit some of that. We're slowly kind of creeping back into that space now as things are lightening up. I'm sitting in the city of Milwaukee right now, and restaurants just opened last week. In fact, I went to dinner last night. It was kind of interesting. So, I think everyone's kind of learning this new normal and new workplace etiquette. So, but most importantly, is the work getting out to meet our customers' needs, and is our staff comfortable with that? We have not implemented a mandatory mask policy. People are more than welcome to wear them to the office if they want. We'll supply them. Our closing rooms have a stack of fresh masks for everyone to come in if they want one. So, I think we're all in the same boat. I'm assuming that most people are tired of hearing about this. So, but those are sort of the things that we've been looking at with the reopening issue.
Yeah, Jay, I was wondering, and Craig, you as well, especially with multiple states, how do you go about monitoring those requirements? I know a couple people have asked about that. It's not something that we're normally, used to doing, and nor are we, I guess, technically liable for it. But, when these, especially Florida, let's use Florida for an example, because they're kind of the reverse of what's happening throughout the country, right? They're tightening their restrictions now, where most things are starting to open up. Like, do you have a designated person that is, kind of monitoring those and kind of keeping everybody up to date as far as, hey, for this particular city or county, this is what's required? And Craig, same thing to you. I mean, you do business in multiple states. So how are you guys actually monitoring that?
We have.
Sure, I would say.
Go ahead, Jay. You take it first.
Yeah, sure. No, but I'd say I kind of touched on it earlier, but it's monitoring your feeds, the discussions, your state, land title associations. I mean, a lot of those discussions are being had there, and the information should be being disseminated out to the other agents and their members. But then also, you've got there's lots of resources on LinkedIn, and but really kind of taking that and making sure it gets down to the managers, and ultimately the managers in the offices those are going to be the ones who have to kind of you know, enforce these and make sure it's happening. So it's in terms of monitoring, I think it comes down to that. You know, find your news feeds, find your sources. It's everywhere right now, right? The information's out there. So if you're looking, you should be able to find it.
Yeah, our staff is very, very, very good at telling us what's happening locally. So we have 6 offices that we've opened in Florida in the last 18 months. And so we're learning. They're all near beaches, you know, which was great when you're in the title business. But when there's COVID and the beaches are sort of closed and there's not a, you know, a lot of these communities are second home cash buyers, wealthy people from other states, and they didn't exist for 45 to 60 days. So business wise, it was a little tough. But figuring out the rules wasn't tough at all. The local folks in each market would tell us exactly what we did in Sanibel Island might have been different than what we did in Pensacola Beach. So the staff was really good at that. You know, Minnesota, we're in Minnesota as well. Different, you know, different ball game there than Wisconsin. So we just have to kind of let our local folks across the 60, 70 offices, you know, help us figure it out and report to us, and then we react to whatever they need to, whatever needs to happen in the local market. We haven't been stumped. When I say we, I think the title industry. I think we've pretty much figured that out. Jay mentioned the Land Title Association. That's a great. I mean, Alta's done a good job at, you know, their daily briefing emails on the COVID response, and the Florida Land Title and all the other land title associations have done a really good job of what's open and what's closed, courthouses, how to get the records, how to do recordings, parking lot closings, and all of that. So it's, I mean, we learned so much in, what has it been, 90 days or something? We've gone from 0 to 100 on disaster preparedness.
Yeah. And I think we were tested on some of that too, your disaster preparedness, you know. And so as we talk a little bit later about the data security, you know, that kind of all ties together. And definitely, yeah, you put some of those into play, I'm sure, you know, as we kind of moved through this. It was definitely a busy time.
Yeah, I agree, Craig, especially what you were just talking about. I'm not surprised, but definitely our industry was able to adapt probably the best out of anywhere that I've seen, as far as how to maintain, you know, transactions still happening, how to maintain safety and, you know, be healthy with remote closings, the drive up closings and whatnot. So I think that our industry had a great response. So we did have a question, and I don't even know too much if this would even apply to us, but I will say, we've had a couple people ask, when you have people coming back into the office, do you guys have any type of like waiver in place saying like they're not sick or that they understand the risk? I don't know that many companies do. I think it's just, you know, this is your job, and if, you know, this is how it's going to play out. But we've had a couple people ask if you guys have any type of process or waiver in place for employees to sign as they're coming back into the office.
No. No, we do not. I'm just trying to look at our policy. I wish I would have read this 10 minutes before this started. I wasn't sure where I would need it, but no, we require self-evaluation of all employees before they leave for work. They're feeling ill at all, or they've got a fever, all of the things that you see when you walk into a grocery store. If you have these symptoms, please turn around and shop some other day. Is the same thing we have here. You know, there are naturally people are sensitive. You know, we have, the government's got policies in place for if they are sick or they're caring for a family member, if they've got children who are in school and you know, not cared for, there's certain precautions for those folks too. But no, we don't have a waiver or anything like that.
Yeah, we don't either.
Yeah, same. So, okay. So if we want to move along, you know, we talked about remote employees, and we chatted a little bit before this, and how you have probably a subgroup of people who are really ready to get back to the office. They really like to do their work at the office. You have a subset that is more comfortable with the uncertainty still of working from home. So I don't see remote employment at this point going away too quickly. And I do think our industry has not been, as a whole, not you guys, but our industry has not been very open to remote employees. We're very brick and mortar, you're there 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And I think this is opening eyes to a lot of people in our industry, seeing how productive a lot of people can be from home. And also it opens up your talent pool, right? So if I don't need someone to come in the office and I can now see that people can do this title work from home or whatnot, I can hire outside of a small radius for people that are commuting in and out. So with all of that said, and more employees continuing to work remotely, what kind of it's a twofold, how do you maintain data security with so many people working remotely? And the secondary to that is, what kind of hurdles do you see organizations facing trying to maintain it long term? Maybe they weren't originally set up for it, and they're going to maybe continue that moving forward. So maybe Jay, if you want to take a stab at this one first.
Sure. So the data security, how do you maintain data security? I mean, your connections to your, to your network, VPN is very, very powerful. And so that's kind of like your level one, is get people VPN before they can connect to your, through your firewall, and you can manage it there. The devices, depending on, I know organizations are all set up differently from an IT perspective, right? So really protecting I mentioned earlier in terms of using company issued equipment, that's definitely a plus in the sense that you can make sure that, the updates are done, it's the patches are issued, so it's got all the recent updates, from the security perspective. But then, your VPN is really the main block in terms of access to your network, and making sure people are, are responsible with, especially the people who aren't used to maybe laptops and used to, having this at home, make sure they're using it, make sure, the kids aren't necessarily doing it. But one of the things that's probably most successful in that is, anybody who's installing softwares and stuff, that really should be limited to, your IT provider admin, an admin password, of a sense, so that they can't install things, especially at home. I mean, who knows if some kid's playing, games on the computer and installs stuff. You don't want that necessarily to happen. So protecting the physical devices, because, in many cases, a lot of people are connecting to their clouds or their on-premise servers, and those have already, the protections in place, or at least they should be, in terms of, protecting the environment, monitoring for things, and remote data security. I mean, we all fall into, Craig, I think you'll agree, like, we, the people, are still the number one, vulnerability in terms of falling for phishing campaigns. Phishing is still, the main target for people to get access to the computer. It's not necessarily guessing your password, for example. That might accommodate for 1% of compromise, is somebody using a weak password and then them getting in, where maybe 99% of it is, people falling for the phish campaign and giving up their strong password and access into the network. So I think if we can try to declutter and minimize your footprint, that really lends itself good to the overall data security and protecting your company and the information. Craig, what do you think?
I mean, I think you just nailed everything for sure. I mean, you've got to have data security, you've got to have encrypted stuff. I mean, you've got to have your people connecting the right way. Our company's exclusively data held in the cloud. So our data is encrypted and safe while it's at rest and when it's in motion. So we spent a ton of time and effort on that. We started migrating that years ago, and it was a challenge. We needed to maintain our production environment and move things at the same time, which was difficult. So our IT guys did a real good job of figuring all that out to allow us to keep producing while we're migrating data from the servers in the back closet or in the back equipment room onto something like Amazon's S3 data centers, and maintaining things like, I wrote this down because one of my IT guys told me, and I don't even know what it means, TLS 1.2 encryption between our network servers, databases, or anything the public can interact with. But from our normal employee who's not IT minded, safe, strong passwords, and just being smart about what they open it's still a challenge. I mean, we send out emails weekly. Hey, this spam came in today. It looks very legit. It's not. So when it hits your email, please don't open it. Here's a preview of what it could look like. These are the warning signs on an email. So those are some of the challenges we've all had, but data security is a tough one. As far as you on the screen here, it says continuing to work for the foreseeable future. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get everyone back to the office and get back to some sort of the way it used to be, but I don't know how that's going to happen or when that's going to happen. So right now we're kind of saying, well, we were all thrown into this with very little notice, and we did our best with access and making sure everyone can complete their jobs. And we've spent the last 45 days or so honing in on making sure everything is done the right way, sprucing up certain systems and access points for security. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, I'd love to see everyone back to the office the way it used to be, but I just don't think that's a reality. I don't require it. It's kind of neat that we've gotten everything done and everyone seems to be happy. Customer wise, we had one closing delayed because the sellers had the buyers had been diagnosed with COVID, and I was like, okay, and the lender didn't accept remote notarizations, and what are we going to do? We're not going to close in a bubble, so we couldn't figure that one out. It was and we only had a couple hours notice, so that closing got delayed a little bit, and then we figured out a workaround. But other than that, we've kind of figured it all out. So now we're just kind of honing in on making sure everything that we figured out in those weird few months have been done the right way. And if we're going to continue to do that, we need to make sure we continue to invest in the right systems and processes. So
yeah, agreed. Jay, you mentioned something when we were talking earlier that I thought was great. You said that the one good thing that really came of it is from an IT perspective, what you guys have done in 3 months could have potentially taken 2 years. And I think that's probably true for all title companies and settlement companies throughout the country, right? They were kind of forced into it. Obviously, they had no choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's not a bad thing, right? That's a good thing. And I think when you said it, I was like, wow, it's a really good way of putting it.
I feel it's a really great thing, and it kind of came as a quote. It's like someone said, so what? It wasn't my CTO, it wasn't my COO, it wasn't my COO who forced the company into a digital revolution. It was the COVID-19,
Yeah.
right? And it just moved things faster. It moved things, and some other companies may be different, right? And there's some of our PDS clients, they're all different. They're all different stages of progressing through and beefing up their protections. Some have way more robust phishing tools. Like Craig, you mentioned we saw this phishing campaign come in. Well, there's some that pull it out of everybody's email box. If not just it's not that everybody has to kind of look for it and mark it. So there really are some tools, and that's really a big difference maker, I think, in our industry is an enhance. Now, you may pay as much for this phishing tool as you do for your email accounts, but they definitely add their value, when done right. And all products are different, right? So I'm not saying every company offering phishing solutions is the same, but some really have a knack for targeting and addressing kind of the needs that we see in this industry. But we've moved so fast. I mean, from the RON pieces. I mean, look at these states. All these states passing. I mean, God knows what kind of there's been some decisions made that I just can't believe. But some may be temporary, but it's really pushed things along. And I think people are going to start to see. You still have some people who haven't accepted it, right? And you hear of these on some of the the state the discussions being had, but really it's like RON's here, in Florida it's here. It's just a matter of how much can you use it? Do you have lenders partnered with it? But really, I mean, and I think the mobile earnest money deposits has been a big thing in this too. In that people who maybe didn't have solutions for that have put in solutions or looking for solutions. because then again, realtors aren't having to drive checks around, people aren't having to drive over to the bank, and so that's been definitely, I think, a couple of the tools that have really highlighted it. And we were exposed, right? I mean,
Right.
cyber attacks were increasing during COVID because they're like, oh, look at all these people. There's all this stuff going around. There's all this information. You know, minimizing that footprint as best you can, you know, within the budget of the organization. I mean, continue to invest in it. Don't think one product fits it all. I mean, I'll mention this because I think a lot of people on the call use it. So Office 365, you know, depending on your email license, you get a lot of security in that E3 license suite that really you need, and they're not all offered by some of the other providers. I mean, even maybe to the Gmail suite. Gmail has some things, and they continue to release things. But right now, it seems Microsoft's E3 licensing comes with the most robust, you know, encryption. I mean, Craig, you mentioned TLS. Microsoft offers, you know, TLS encryption in their direct emails. It verifies the receiver, you know, as it's sending it. You know, so turning on everything that you have available to you in the things that you're already doing, that's probably a really good way to focus on the data security. You know, turn on multi-factor where you can. Turn on, you know, I mean, that's a huge one, right? And we don't all do it because of convenience, but internal accounts too, like the access your staff get. And some of the larger organizations that deal with more of a marketing group, I think, you know, that kind of adds its own separate exposure, because then you're like, okay, we have to get this data out there. You know, let's vet these different platforms and make sure you're turning on things. So if your sales reps, who are often big targets of, you know, some of the fraud, you know, make sure you're protecting them on the IT side as best you can as well.
You brought up something, and Craig, or I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question that came in, because I think you might know who it's from. Initials are DT. It says, how are you utilizing your multi-factor authentication for your applications if you remotely host your title production systems? How do you use your multi-factor to access?
Okay, yeah, so first of all, if we can block anyone
I
named
tried.
with the initials DT, I've been trying to block that guy in real life.
I think maybe he used a fake name to get in.
Well, let me touch on two-factor. First of all, two-factor or multi-factor authentication is really important. It's probably the most important thing that I would tell someone they could put in place immediately after watching the seminar. It doesn't take a lot of effort, and even adding the slightest hurdle will stop the easiest hacks, the easiest phishing scam. But beyond that, encrypting the data at rest and in transit is the most important for us. We do use the G Suite. We do not use the Microsoft Suite at our company. We've been G Suite users for a long time. It's not cheap. It's very robust. The data security stuff, you pay a little extra for, it's great. We just integrated a company called Virtue, which is the integration with the G Suite for when we're sending emails that need to be encrypted or password or locked or expired or prevented from being forwarded. So if you're using the free Gmail system, there are still some protections you can put in place, but if you could use two-factor authentication, that's very, very important. Our production system is with SoftPro, and we have a little bit of our production system in-house. And they both, with SoftPro, it's through the remote desktop features and all of the other features where the multi-factor authentication is required. So you have to be logged into a Chrome browser in order to access certain things, and that in itself has two-factor automatically built in with our company. Our employees don't have the option to be employees here. They have to. They can't log into their system without a two-factor or multi-factor authentication in place. So that's what I know about that.
We're the same way. We have to do a two-factor as well, and it works well, and you're utilizing secure channels. So, all right, I think we might move on to talk a little bit about wire fraud. Some of the stuff that we already talked about is also on some upcoming slides, but we've touched on it, but we haven't really touched too much on wire fraud prevention. And I know that it's kind of like Ron in my book, right? It's something you hear about all the time that you maybe feel like you're getting a little tired of hearing about it. But at the end of the day, I mean, we are still exposed on a daily basis. And it's also one of those things that I feel like people are, oh, it won't happen to me until it does, right? And so I was just, kind of hoping to get some insight from you guys, Craig, more of a how you handle it and what you have in place to protect customers from wire fraud for your organizations and the kind of the processes and how you handle wiring instructions. And same with you, Jay, but also Jay, maybe from maybe more of a technical side of things of how it works. But if you guys kind of want to talk a little bit of what steps do you have in place to protect consumers and how do you handle wiring instructions? I mean, they come in all different forms from lenders, and how do you make sure you vet that and know that it's the correct one and so on and so forth? So Craig, I'm
Yeah.
gonna throw that
Yeah.
one to you.
Sure. I mean, wire fraud is the thing that it keeps me up at night in this business. Nothing else does. I'm not afraid of missing a judgment or missing a mortgage or recording something with the wrong legal or making a typo. Those things are all easily replaceable, fixable. Sure, they might take a little court action. They might have a claim here and there. But wire fraud, if someone wipes out your entire escrow account and you don't catch it, you're done. So this is the critical thing in my business. So period. What do? We do things, I think most title companies, most underwriters, most every seminar on wire fraud has great solutions. There's many great solutions. Every title company does it a little differently. So I don't think what we do is, I think what we do is great. But I've seen stuff that other people do that I'll bring back to the office and we'll implement. But we have a 3-person process. So person A, let's just say closer A, initiates the wire. Closer B in that office approves the wire, and no one gets to send a wire except for person C, who sits in a separate office in a bunker with 8,000 27-inch monitors and high data and all that stuff to fire off the wire. So 3 people have to look at it, double check the routing numbers, double check the legitimacy. Is it really the payoff? Is this really the seller's email address? It's kind of a quality control, 3 levels. Again, is it overkill? Might be, but we've been doing it for many years and it's worked out great. Also, the wire fraud that most people think about today as, the seller or the buyer being duped into wiring the money for the closing to the wrong entity. So someone, hacking into the agent's email and tricking them into wiring it to someone that they think is our company. So we've worked on that for years as well. I like our process. I know everyone watching, you all have great processes. You like yours, I like mine. As soon as we get the order, as soon as the contract comes into our office, our closer contacts the buyer verbally on the phone and doesn't give up until we actually speak to the person and we introduce ourselves. This is, so that's day 0. The closing's probably happening in day 45. So on day 0, we make a physical phone-to-phone contact with them and remind them they're going to get weird emails through a transaction. None of them do not trust any email that has anything to do with wire, except for the one I'm going to send you right when we hang up, as I'll summarize this conversation. So we have that day 0 conversation, and we will never change the wire instructions. So that helps, that protects us too, because if the buyer forgets and wires out money and we've got it documented, we had the conversation, we had the follow-up email, we've talked to you, and the buyer just flat out screwed up. I mean, there's really nothing we can do there. Now, there are some pretty interesting software packages out there in the title world to help with this stuff too. Those are all great. I like those too. But I like having a verbal conversation with the person who's going to be wiring us money right up front, way before the hacker even knows there's a transaction. So again, a million other solutions. I'm sure they're all great. That's the one we use. What about you, Jay?
Yeah, Craig, I'm with you on the phone piece, the phone touch point. That's definitely like a must-have, I think, and regardless of the solution you have in play. In terms of knowing when they view the wire instructions, there's some things there. There are programs out there that offer additional cyber coverage, and kind of you see that in 2 models where and make sure you're reading the fine print. So some are insuring you, the title agent. Essentially, should you get sued for this wire fraud, then they'll give you the money, which you can then give over to the person that maybe lost it. Others might be insuring the buyer directly with their funds. So there's different things you kind of solve for when you're looking for these solutions. Having a documented process and not wavering from it. If you say you're not sending stuff by email, make sure you guys aren't sending it by email.
It only takes
and
one.
then also, yeah. And I always come back to this example of like this movie scene and this, U.S. base, overseas, and the guy's like, we have to follow protocol 100% of the time, because the 1% we don't, that's when the bomb goes off. Like you have to monitor it. And you can have more than one process. You don't have to have just a portal. You can have more than one, but make sure, that's clear, that's communicated. Probably try not to change it too often, because, your clients are, they need to understand it as well. And so they can communicate it to their clients, but it starts with the phone call, then the delivery, and really reminding it. I mean, we've even gone so far as getting, a wire fraud disclosure signed in advance, so that they really understand that the threat is real. But again, to Craig's point, it doesn't mean a very tenacious hacker isn't going to be able to dupe that person, regardless of every effort we've put into play. And that can happen as well. So be diligent, stay on top of it, and try not to let your guard down. It's not just the buyer's funds. It's not just us sending the seller proceeds, but then also the payoff. Last year payoffs kind of came on board, and payoffs were getting sent fake payoffs. So you can, I think a centralized department, Craig mentioned, you've got that one person. So that's essentially a centralized wire, right? A wire department, whether it's one person or multiple, but having those checks and balances, making sure everything's intact. And if anything's missing, there are creative ways that you can kind of go about making sure that somebody isn't getting sent an updated payoff letter, for example. How do you prevent that from happening last minute, regardless of how legit it looks, because they're just changing numbers. The form is their form. So
I'm glad you
have your process in place and document it.
I'm glad you mentioned the insurance component too, because that's pretty important. There's some new stuff out there. I mean, insurance, you have to look at that stuff every year. You can't just renew. You've got to look at what coverages are, look at title, exclusions and exceptions. Look what's in your policy on all of the required insurances that you need to be in the title business. So that's a good one.
Yeah, Craig, what do you see from your side on the lender perspective, like the lender community, in terms of pushback?
I don't see any from the pushback from the lender community. I think what we get, if we get any pushback from anyone, it's real estate agents who say we're too difficult, which is great. I'm fine. We might be too difficult, but you're using Hotmail with no security turned on, so we're even. But so I mean that's the only pushback I would get. I think once we talk to the buyer and seller about wire fraud a little bit as a friendly, trusted title company, then it's a heck of a lot easier. But yeah, so every now and then we're told that we're a little too difficult on our money transfer policies, but I'm sorry, that's the the most important thing in my world.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about convenience, right? Although it's really not that inconvenient at the same time. I mean, a multi-factor used to be the most inconvenient thing for people in the world. Now it's like, I don't like to deal with platforms that don't have it. And so I think that's kind of been a shift. And what's happened, I think, is on the lender and realtor side, especially the lenders, that they have their own portals now too, right? So they totally understand this world, and whether you're doing it by portal, I mean, there's also the offering text by wire instructions by text, or there's the option to send it encrypted. There can be an argument against all of them, but really having your internal process in place and sticking to it, that's the most important, because there's got to be accountability too, I think, on the staff side. if you're saying don't ever send it this way, and then somebody sends it that way and you get burned, well, I mean, what do you do? How many times do they get away with it? So
Yeah, we spent a
yeah,
lot of time. We spent a lot of time going from realtor association to realtor association, all around our market centers, letting people know, let us come in and talk to your real estate staff or the local real estate, realtor boards. Give us 30 minutes on wire fraud. We've got some horrible stories that you'll need to hear. And then here's how you prevent this from happening to your customers. So we did that for a while and then recorded a video and put it on our website. So when we have a new realtor client, we email them a link to that, just ask them to watch that so they know how to prevent wire fraud. But there's so many bad stories. It's the easiest thing to teach someone is, turn on your two-factor, turn on your, your security features. If, why, here's a 10-minute video, watch this, and then you'll know why. So it's been pretty effective. And those videos are all out there. Every underwriters have them, a lot of title agents have them. So if you just Google wire fraud title company in YouTube or something, you'll find some good ones.
Yeah, and at the bottom of this slide, we got what's the best advice for wire fraud prevention? I mean, I really think phishing training and testing, doing internal tests, make sure you understand, if people in your organization aren't getting it, and if they're clicking on these things. So whatever phishing tools and campaigns you have in play, you can send fake ones. And just in case anybody doesn't know that's on the call, some of the most common clicked campaigns are like Amazon delivery confirmations, things of that nature. They're not even your wire instructions, or a LinkedIn message or conversation from somebody that's getting sent to your email. So be wary of that kind of thing. But definitely phishing training and testing, it can really make a big impact in your wire fraud and data security platforms. It cuts out a lot of the clutter.
Hey, Jay and Craig, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. As I expected, a little bit of technical difficulty here at the beach. So for some reason, I lost connection, so I apologize. I could hear you guys, but you couldn't hear me, and it's not allowing me to move the slides, which is fine because it's just stuff we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of ask you guys the whole data security best practices piece, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So just kind of starting off, where to start with implementing data security best practices in your office. I'm sure everyone has a different definition of what may or may not be, considered data security. So I don't know if you guys have any steps that you put in place to get there. I know maybe you have a different approach just based on your type of organizations, but just if somebody is wanting to sit down and say, okay, I want to make sure I meet the best practices for data security, where do they start?
For us, we started moving everything into the cloud. I mean, look, we're title people. We've got 6 people in-house in our IT and software staff. But having those folks, sitting in a server room patching, server patches and fixing switches and routers and dealing with, Cisco upgrades and all that is not what I have in mind for the time best spent with our staff. So moving everything into a place like Amazon for us has been great. That's what they do for a living. They maintain those servers. If we need to scale up, if I hire 40 people or we have a very busy day and I need to ramp up the speed of our servers because there's 400 people on it, it's 2 clicks and we can double double everything. It's very, very inexpensive compared to owning all of our own stuff. So that 2-factor, strong email passwords, strong passwords, educating them on phishing schemes, celebrating victories when your staff catches one, and we share it with the whole company. So I think that works out well.
Yeah, and all those things that you kind of mentioned, Craig, that's essentially establishing, a culture of compliance, a culture of security within the organization, so that people understand and feel that, and they all know what's expected of them as well. And to add to that, I think you add training. Make sure you're training. Make sure you have your documentation, and the people know your position on these things. Again, the cloud as well. So that's what from your data. I mean, that's our core business is moving people to the cloud. And there's definitely benefits. I mean, you've got these facilities that are, hardened facilities, controlled access. Um, there's definitely a lot of benefits. And to Craig's point, the scalability of a virtual environment. Should resources change, you can kind of scale it up in a couple clicks.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys have any tips for? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just reading the other question on there. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
Yeah, no, I just, not everybody, as you well know, nationwide, most of our title industry is mom and pop. So a lot of people don't have in-house IT departments. So, I was just wondering, Craig, if I know you guys do, and I know Jay, obviously you guys do with your setup. So, how does someone go about implementing when they don't have their own IT department and maintaining it?
I mean, we're in some very small towns in northern Wisconsin too, and some rural areas. There's always a local, at least for us, there's always been, for the agencies that we've acquired around the state, there's always been a small agency that we acquired with 4 or 5 people. They have a managed software or hardware company in town that helps manage those services. The owner of a title agency, I mean, unless you're super, super ultra nerdy, which I assume some of you are, if there's over 100 people watching this, there's probably some super ultra owner nerds out there. I mean, if you're spending your time, instead of with your customers or your staff or doing the title work, trying to figure out the next step of maintaining your own systems, I don't know, maybe you ought to think about looking at a local person that could handle some of that stuff for you. I tell you what, I have never been to a title association event where there's not booths full of people that offer those types of services. So they're out there, they understand your business, you just have to go out and find them. But doing it ourselves is something probably 15 plus years ago. We decided that we'd rather be in the closing rooms or in the courthouse working on title research than trying to figure out why the fan blew in one of the servers and trying to figure out how to replace that while all your staff has nothing to do. So Jay, I know you're an expert at that, so I'll just throw that one over to you. This is probably an easier question for you to answer.
Yeah, and we deal with that a lot on the IT side. So, I mentioned we offer, IT service to title agents. I mean, that's kind of our focus with Premier Data. But everybody has different needs and different sizes and stuff. You got to find one that a model that fits for you. You got to understand, some of the big factors and, what helps an agent actually make the transition has to do with their point of investment. How recent has it been since they've invested in all these physical servers? And when is the timing right to maybe virtualize it? So what are their agreements with their current providers? So you understanding that, and I think if people, when that opportunity is there for you, that it makes financial sense, do your homework, talk to a couple providers, understand how you're going to compare the different services. If there's things you don't understand that are kind of being included, try to get an explanation of that. There's usually a reason, but then also know that there may be things that you should be doing that you're not. And we kind of touched on this earlier, like the disaster recovery. Like, is your data being backed up? If you're hosting it yourself and you've got your servers on premise, you may not have the most robust backup plan. And there's a cost to that. There's a kind of a cost to everything. But it's not really as financially. I don't think the financial part is really the hurdle. We're still, as an industry, we come in at like 5% of your revenue spent on IT, more or less that amount, which isn't unheard of. It might just be more than you're used to paying now. And so I think if you maybe use that as your own milestone, and if that's where, as you're making your decisions, you're looking to kind of compare providers, know that you can get a lot of bang for your buck, with some of these different services. Stagger it accordingly, set your business up so that it's, you don't have to worry about it as much, right? To Craig's point, if you manage your business, let somebody with more resources essentially manage the IT side of it. And that comes down to, this whole discussion has been about data privacy, data protection, Having somebody do your password management, and that goes for the owners, that goes for any exec, any of the partners, their accounts too. Passwords need to have a timeout period. They need to expire. They need to be forced to change. You can force password requirements. You really got to kind of have those in play, to kind of as the gatekeeper. And so that's kind of what I would suggest. And if you're starting, try to make sure you understand, what you're currently paying for, what you currently have in place, and look at some of the suggestions in the proposals, and kind of compare and understand, what's really needed to be that full service package. And I think that'll kind of help you get there. So.
Yeah, as far as the password requirement, I'd highly recommend a service like LastPass. There's several of them out there. I like LastPass to manage all of your passwords. If you do the research, a lot of people think the more complex, the better. But remember, when they have to change their complex password in a month, all they do is change the last number. And it's not very complex anymore now, is it? So using a service like LastPass, which isn't very expensive at all, to maintain and generate passwords. A lot of companies are going to passwords that aren't just an 8-number or 8-letter, 8-character thing. It's a phrase. So my grandmother's name is Angelina. That's your password. I mean, who's going to ever guess that? Plus, it has spaces and things in it. So no, that's not my password, Jay. But I like things like that. So those are some of the things. But yeah, and obviously the easy joke, people write their passwords under their keyboard. Okay, obviously, if anyone's still doing that, they really need to be given a talking to.
And on that point, password, that's our first level of protection, right? Even if you're in a virtual cloud environment, when you log into your virtual desktop, you got to log into your computer, and that one domain password, that's your gatekeeper. Make sure your staff are not using that password for any other site on any other application.
Everybody does. Everyone has the same password for their Facebook, for their bank, for their Amazon. I don't get it. So
LastPass, to Craig's point, I mean, yeah, I like LastPass. I use it as well, because there's so many passwords out there. And, I remember, my domain password. I don't store that one in LastPass, but it can remember all my newsletters and my all those other passwords I got to remember. And then that way, if the site is ever spoofed as well, you'll realize your LastPass doesn't populate it because it's a different site and different address. So there's definitely some security in there. And the passwords are encrypted at rest. They're, just so you guys are aware, there is a chance these sites also get hacked, but doesn't mean your passwords will get exposed. It just might mean they tried to get there. But your passwords are going to be encrypted. Another solution too for people, and not everybody may realize this, is your phones may have a built-in password manager that's more secure than the notepad on your phone. Okay, so don't use notepads on your phone to store your passwords. Use that, like Apple, for example, use the encrypted one that uses the bio authentication, whether it's your fingerprint or the face scan or password, and it encrypts all the passwords you store in there. So transition maybe from your little notepad to those encrypted passwords for storage as well.
Yeah, that was going to be my advice, is maybe don't keep a spreadsheet of your passwords on your computer so that when someone gets in there, they can just pull it up and see it. I actually saw somebody one time when I was at their office, and it literally was named passwords. And I was like, anyone coming onto your computer is going to see that. So great idea with the whole password keeper on your phone. So.
But the letter O in password was a 0. Who would ever guess that?
Yeah.
But look,
wait, that's not a good thing?
Even if somebody does guess your password and they get through that first factor, if you have multi-factor set up, it's going to say someone in a different computer we're not familiar with has guessed your password. It'll text your phone and say, is this you? So now you know you've been compromised. But if you don't have multi-factor on, someone's going to guess your password and you're just going to be out of luck. All right, what's this recipes thing?
Oh my God, you're about to be blown away.
I'm getting hungry.
First, I have a question. Somebody asked if you use document portals for remote employees and a portal to exchange documents. So I know a lot of people have concerns about the way they're sending documents to and from, especially with remote set up. So I don't know if one of you can maybe just real quick touch on that, because I think that's something a lot of people are asking.
Yeah, I think you got to have some sort of document portal. I mean, getting your staff to use it and establishing those processes, that's going to be your bigger challenge than choosing a portal, I would imagine. But definitely there's not sending content by email kind of should maybe linger in your head. Is avoid any kind of content by email. Assume email is compromised, whether it's yours or not. It might be the realtors, it might be the buyers or the sellers. I mean, some people have been compromised so early, it's before they've even signed a contract. And then all of a sudden, oh, the contract came in, they get a little alert, and they've got this email forward rule on, or the person's just monitoring, waiting for the time. So document portals do help deliver. The thing, you do get some feedback from your clients. They may not like it, and I don't know that there's one that everybody will like, but you guys can have your own platform, and there's a lot of solutions out there as well for that. Greg, what do you think?
I'm zoned out. I'm waiting for a refreshment.
Oh my God!
Me too. I'm kind of hungry.
You skipped over the food and went to the refreshment. So
or whatever.
I will
This is a refreshment.
All right, here you go. Everything you've been waiting for. Please note I made this last night just to make sure that I really did love it, and I do. But firecracker shrimp is, I'm not going to go through all the instructions like I ever do, but you can substitute chicken if you do not care for seafood, but I strongly suggest this. This is so good. You can make it as hot or as mild as you want. You can leave out the red pepper flakes or not use as much hot sauce, but we like things a little spicy in our food here. It's really good plain. It's good as an appetizer. It's also really good over rice or Asian noodles if you're interested. And one of my favorite new drinks this summer has become the strawberry jalapeno margarita. It's so easy to make. It might even, Ellen might be crushed to hear this, but it might even be taking over my blood orange margarita favorite. So we're going to make it a couple more times and see how much. But again, I know we went over on time. I apologize for the last 10 minutes of technical issues. And I just really want to say thank you so much to both Jay and Craig, and for continuing on while I was off audio. I really appreciate that. We appreciate all of your advice, all of your input. We definitely hope you'll join us another time. We did have a few questions that we maybe didn't get to, but they were real specific that I might send to you guys afterwards if you don't mind taking a look at it and sending back. And as a reminder to everybody, we will be sending a recap link. We will go ahead and answer any Q&As. I am going to have to block a certain DT again. He wants to know if we should always respond to emails that have the word kindly in them. I mean, I think that's a given, right? always give whatever information they want. That's a legit one. Yeah.
That's legit.
100%. Also, maybe, if it's coming from another country, that's also really good too. So, again, you guys, thank you so much. Sorry that there were some technical errors. We appreciate your time and your input. And with that, I think we will sign off, and I hope everybody has a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks.